You know, since Nintendo has finally entered the 16-bit era, with Sega and the rest of the consoles who are already in this era, this made great opportunities for developers to make games for both systems. In other words, multi-platform. Well, here's something that we've never done. Talk about multi-platform games. Usually whenever there's a game in the early 90s that's going to be on more than one gaming platform, we often have to wait for a year or so for that game to reach to another platform, because development of a game to be on another system was hard work, getting the program to get used to the controls and how to run the game on the system, even with its graphical and gameplay limitations. But in this case, developers took advantage of getting more people to play their games on these systems. Of course, we had older games making it to the 16-bit console scene like Prince of Persia that had better graphics than on the original PC games, Out of This World that wasn't quite good as the PC port. Lemmings brought this new style of puzzle games to be very suitable to play in the living room. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time, despite that the console port only had 2 players only, Konami made changes with the music and new level designs that surprisingly enough made it better than the arcade version. And Street Fighter 2 that brought the fighting game boom in the 90s right at home, while Capcom had released Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition and Hyper Fighting in the arcades in this year. But the one game that straightly went through multi-plat is a classic called Lost Vikings. This is a brilliant puzzle platformer where you take control of 3 different Vikings: Eric the Swift, Belog the Fierce, and Olaf the Stout. The goal is to guide all the Vikings safely through each level, and due to the fact that the players control 3 different characters, only one at a time is given. Each of them have their own individual abilities and must work as a team to solve these puzzles and progress. Eric can run faster than the 2, can jump, and can bash through walls and enemies with his helmet. Belog can kill enemies with his sword, or from long distance with his bow where he can hit enemies, and also to be used to hit switches from long distances. Olaf can block enemies and projectiles with his shield, and use his shield as a hand glider or as a stepping stone for Eric to enable him to reach high grounds. This also means that the character that is not controlled at any moment remain open to hazards and must either be protected or left in safety. This is an incredible game unlike anything before it, because this isn't a platformer that rushes players to beat level to level, but instead makes them think and react to any obstacle, while each of the characters have their own limitations. Multi-platform games became a major factor in the video game business in 1992. However, there are other consoles that never had the privilege to have the multi-plat games now being offered in the gaming industry, because it costs money and time for developers to even go even more multi-plat, and there's no guarantee that these games will sell well from the systems that no one cares for anymore. So I have to get on the consoles that are now primitive at this point. Ever since the Super Nintendo was released, Nintendo fans were going crazy on these new games for that system. However, there are still some that actually kept their NES, and boy were they in luck for keeping the system, because Nintendo did not forget about the console that put them on the map by continue releasing the NES exclusives. If you're a Mega Man fan, 1992 had to be the best year for you guys, because you guys got 2, count it, 2 Mega Man games released this year. Mega Man 4 was released on the 4th quarter of 1992, and Mega Man 5 was released on the 4th quarter of the same year. The graphics and gameplay are just the same as to all the other previous Mega Man games, but why change it if the previous games were already awesome? You just needed to add new challenges and additions to keep the experience better. In Mega Man 4, you will face new robot masters such as Bright Man, Toad Man, Drill Man, Feral Man, Rain Man, Dust Man, Drive Man, and Skull Man that were all worthy enough for a challenge. But what's even more of a satisfying experience is Mega Man 5's Robot Masters: Gravity Man, Wave Man, Stone Man, Gyro Man, Star Man, Charge Man, Napalm Man, and Crystal Man. Definitely out of the 2, Mega Man 5 is the best one, because it was the most polished 8-bit Mega Man game that had a crap load of different powers to use thanks for the best variety of Robot Masters of the series, the best challenge out of all the NES Mega Man games, and definitely a gripping storyline that I didn't expect to be in the NES game. Speaking of gripping storylines in the NES game, definitely one of the best games released in 1992 from the NES is Dragon Warrior 4. This is my pick of the best role-playing game of 1992, because nearly a year after Final Fantasy II, or 4, was released, RPG fans returned to their 8-bit systems for such a deep and engaging tale. You have a great cast of characters introduced in 4 individual adventures, forming together into a cohesive unit. We the player take control of the hero, while the other characters follows along in your own strategy profile. It has a very distinctive battle system that is the peak of all the battle systems in the 8-bit era. It was such a huge departure from the series, but it was a good thing considering that you want your characters to evolve as you go along in this epic quest divided into chapters with different playable characters in each chapter leading up to having all of them to come together. This was such a memorable experience and also one of the lasting impressions on the NES because the system was soon to be discontinued in the following years. Another console that too was losing popularity in 1992 was the TurboGrafx-16. It's sad for me to say that we're nearing the end of mentioning the TurboGrafx in the gaming in the 90s because the system was so overshadowed by the Genesis and Super Nintendo that it's practically forgotten in North America. The biggest highlight of the TurboGrafx-16 offered in 1992 was the CD add-on to make their game's graphics and frame rates better. Even though the system had just released a CD-ROM add-on in Japan, it was difficult to find it anywhere in North America outside of the big cities that were primarily sold, and when you find a CD-ROM add-on, it costs $400. So it's wise to just wait for the Turbo Duo to be released in the Christmas season in 1992 because it was $100 cheaper than the add-on itself. But enough on NEC Corporation's direction on CD gaming. What games did the system offer in 1992? Continuing the Bonk series, Hudson Soft realized that the TurboGrafx-16 mascot wasn't getting as much appeal that would get people to buy the system and the games. So they made a new character that changes Bonk's appearance from a cute caveman into a shades-wearing cyborg with a game called Air Zonk. This game was an attempt to update the company's image with a modern punkish character called Zonk. Instead of making this a side-scrolling platformer, instead this was a side-scrolling shooter where it plays like every other shooter game in the genre where the game makes the player to fly on screen and it's up to the player to survive against the incoming enemies by repeated shooting. But what Air Zonk did differently is it allowed you to pick a companion character to team up with to perform special attacks. Companion characters can help the character by attacking enemies and by granting Air Zonk special attacks and occasionally temporarily invulnerability. Though this game was a hot seller for the Turbo in 1992, I didn't think it was that great of a game because I would much prefer it to be a platformer like the previous Bonk games. Now, if you want a platformer for this system, look no further than New Adventure Island. You might heard of the Adventure Island series from the NES because this was the series' first take on the TurboGrafx-16, and the series also had the Super Nintendo game released the same year called Super Adventure Island. But I think New Adventure Island is a superior game because it was very close to the NES classic that we all know and love. It's simple. Take out every enemy in your way, collect fruits and items, avoid deadly obstacles, and get to the end of the level before you die, and considering that this game challenges you on your energy meter slowly dissipates, and to replenish it is to collect fruits, and also enemies can give you instant kills. New to the series is the skateboarding feature that was really hip for young audiences, and really fantastic backgrounds that were so nice to watch. But my favorite TurboGrafx game released in 1992 is Shockman. Now, judging by the title of this game, it looks like a standalone game, but actually, this game was a sequel to Kaizuro Choji Shibabiman, and this was the only game of the series that managed to be sold in Japan, so they had to change it from Modified Superhero Shibabiman to A New Enemy to simply Shockman. If you're following the story of the game, be prepared to be confused because being that it's a direct sequel of the mouthful title, in order for it to make any sense is if you played the first. Boy, weren't we all screwed. But however, what makes it up is definitely the awesome gameplay that resembles a lot from Mega Man. But what's different from all the other Mega Man games is that you can either choose Arnold or Sonya that have their own capabilities, bonus shooter levels, a two-player mode that adds the fun factor, and very large boss fights that are some of the best boss fights available for the TurboGrafx-16. Another gaming platform that didn't have any of the multi-plat games available for that system is PC gaming. But why are they worried about receiving any multi-plat games that consoles are now having, while they have great titles being released this year that are so innovative? Horror games in the 80s weren't all that frightening because they didn't have the cinematic presentation that would give gamers a nightmarish experience. That is, until you play a point-and-click adventure game called Darkseed. Unlike most point-and-click adventure games, which gives the players time to explore, almost every section in Darkseed has to fall within a precise time limit or the game will end up in an unwinnable state. What always gets people's attention is some of the most disturbing imagery and haunting atmosphere that really terrified many gamers when it was released. Thanks to its cinematic style of its narrative, it got a lot of people off their feet when witnessing its horror. But a much more revolutionary horror game that came out for the PC in 1992 was the very first survival horror game called Alone in the Dark. Wow, we finally reached our first 3D game in gaming in the 90s. Anyway, the original title is set out in a haunted house where there are plenty of puzzle solving to see more of the secrets in this mansion, finding clues and items that will help you progress through the game, and plenty of creatures and Cthulhu-inspired monsters that really did terrify many people when it was released. You're able to defend yourself with some weapons that can be found, but don't expect this game to be just a walk in the park because you're limited with low ammo and limited combat, which is the staple of making games scary. Much of the game involves exploration and puzzle solving and searching the house for clues to advance the story and learn more about what happened before the player's arrival. Unlike its sequels and much of the survival horror genre, the game is quite non-linear, and many areas of the house may be explored in any order. Alone in the Dark was not only an innovator to this soon-to-be-called survival horror, but it's also one of the biggest baby steps in games to be in 3D. Thanks for the best usage of well-crafted polygons to make the presentation to look believable. And believe me, throughout gaming in the 90s, we will see how games in 3D have evolved to what gaming is now today. Another game that was as well the baby steps of 3D games is a classic called Wolfenstein 3D. Two programmers named John Carmack and John Romero had founded a company called IDsoft, and for a while they've been making clones and ripoffs, and it was not until they finally made something original, releasing a game called Catacomb 3D, and their next game took what was left off from Catacomb into a whole new level. What IDsoft succeeded when releasing Wolfenstein 3D was not creating the first-person shooter genre per se, but establishing and popularizing first-person shooters in general. It's not fully 3D like Alone in the Dark due to the fact that there were a lot of 2D sprites, but what this game did was create a wide open space where the player can turn around and move forward in order to travel around in the 3D world. As for the combat, it's whatever weapon you're wielding and how much ammo you have collected for that weapon, and all you have to do is center your screen to the target and simply fire to kill your enemy. Since this game was set in World War II, your enemy variety is Nazi soldiers, rapid dogs, and futuristic Nazi soldiers. Weapons, ammo, and life can be found anywhere, and all you have to do is simply walk past through it to automatically collect it. These were the staples of what every first-person shooter games follow today, and it's thanks to Wolfenstein 3D that innovated it. No doubt, without this game, first-person shooters will cease to exist, and somehow I wish this game wasn't released, because as the genre got more and more popular, the lower our common denominator in today's games, creativity and intelligence, is very little to no more. However, I will say that the only thing I find interesting about first-person shooters is that I'm fascinated on how this genre evolved back when the genre actually did have creativity and the capability of making something new. Either you like or hate first-person shooters, there's no argument that IDsoft were gods of gaming, because they take all opportunities whenever they get the chance and go above and beyond once they take that opportunity. I love the strategy of IDsoft. Romero is the guy with all these insane ideas, and Carmack has the programming skills to make it happen. Guess what happens when you don't have these two working together? You get mediocre games. Since these were the days that we were still used to games being side-scrolling, seeing games like this in first person, or what I like to call moving camera view, felt realistic and believable that these enemies we're encountering are not just obstacles, but instead legitimate threats. Hell, this game was so controversial for having Nazi symbols, and to have a level of violence this high was considered to be a murder simulator. Did IDsoft stop doing this and settle the controversy? Just wait and find out in the later videos of gaming in the 90s. But Alone in the Dark and Wolfenstein 3D weren't the only games innovating gaming. Of course, we can't go without mentioning the innovative real-time strategy called Dune 2. While it's not per se the first real-time strategy game, it was the very game that establishes the subgenre and got the general public excited for strategy games, since strategy games before it was for smart people who likes to strategize in war tactics. Dune 2, on the other hand, makes the player take the role of a commander where he or she uses the mouse and guide their troops to create their military force against the opposing team by building more buildings to create war vehicles, more troops, defenses, and other members of your military to collect resources. Now, being called real-time strategy is that the genre wastes no time in taking turns, but instead rushes the player to do everything that needs to be built and use whatever you created against the opposing team without taking any turns. Being that you have your fleet, every one of your troops and vehicles await, and throughout the clock you have to keep guiding your military to uncharted areas that's covered pitch black and make them do what they were meant to do, like finding resources in order to build more things, or simply attack an enemy on sight, or defend whatever. It may not just be destroying your enemies, but also, in campaign, you also have mission objectives that needs to be accomplished. It's one of the most influential games that came out in the 90s, and from here on out, RTS has become the most popular aspects in the PC gaming industry. Phew, that's a lot to talk about PC games. Now let's discuss about arcades. Already, arcade manufacturers succeeded in making arcades popular again by adding multiplayer games that goes above the standards of two-player mode, and also starting the fighting game boom throughout the 90s. And we got brilliant titles such as Konami's X-Men. Now, since the cartoon series, based on the comic book, has just begun, kids everywhere were going nuts over the game because you're able to play familiar characters from the comics to cooperate in a beat-em-up with a total of 6. Counted! 6 players! Dude, not even consoles today even let you play up to 6 players locally at home. And with this number of players, this calls great number of enemy variety and very long levels to face familiar villains of the series as boss fights. I do admit that this game is a little unfair whenever you use special attacks, which decreases your hit points, but considering that most of the special attacks fill up half of the screen, it does however balance it out. But hell, we didn't care. We just wanted to have the best moments of our lives playing as our X-Men characters with our friends and beat the crap out of everyone who sided with Magneto. Another multiplayer smash hit in the arcades is my favorite shoot-'em-up of all time, Sunset Riders. Though it was only 2 players behind X-Men's 6-player feature, Sunset Riders had the craziest amount of outlaws that you could blast off, and not once did this game felt boring. You could choose Billy or Steve, who wields the handguns, or Bob or Carmano, that uses shotguns. Throughout the game, you explore a vast variety of western locations as levels such as the desert, trains, the mountains, bars, and all sorts of spaghetti western locations that you can think of that were put right into this game. You also have all sorts of bosses that vary from bank robbers to Native Americans to Mexican outlaws. This was one hell of a fun time playing Sunset Riders. Even though I did spend more time on the console versions, the arcade port still stands as the dominant because of its 4-player cooperative, great frame rates, clear sound, and the best quality of 16-bit animation available at the time. All the more reasons why this game is one of my favorite arcade games of all time. And we can't go without mentioning fighting games because since Street Fighter II hit the arcades, it started the fighting game boom throughout the 90s. And already after a year, what other fighting game could go up against the awesomeness of Street Fighter II? Already we had knockoffs and other fighting games that took too much of inspiration from Street Fighter II to look too familiar, except an American company called Midway realizes the opportunities of competing against Capcom Street Fighter and finally released This was a brand new one-on-one style fighting game that uses the innovative photographic digitized sprites using real actors as playable characters. Though you have a very small selection of characters such as Sonya Blade, Johnny Cage, Kano, Liu Kang, Raiden, Sub-Zero, and Scorpion, they were still awesome because of their own move selection and crazy advantages. What's so crazy about this game, along with every other game of the series, is that the combat was totally insane, where attacks were so out of the ordinary, and the fast-paced fight was unlike anything we've ever seen. But of course, we can't talk about this game without mentioning the most controversial moment in gaming, period. the fatality system. This is the final kill where the winner takes their chance to finish their opponent in the most brutal way possible, like ripping off someone's head off, burning them alive, and so much more that it got so many people to go to the arcades to see the fatalities. But also caught mothers' attention when they pick up their children from the arcades where they were stunned to see the level of blood, gore, and violence. This also got politics to go against violence in video games that still to this day is still controversial to the public. And yet Midway didn't care about how much politics tried to stop them because they continued making Mortal Kombat games and became worthy competitors against Capcom, who for a very long time has been the king of arcade. Since we got all that out of the way, now let's continue talking about the rivalry between Sega and Nintendo, because now they're both competing against each other on the same level, both on the 16-bit console and their own portable systems. For the Game Boy, Nintendo has released the sequel of Super Mario Land with Super Mario Land 2 Golden Coins, which is definitely a superior game, and a birth of a new series with a game called Kirby's Dream Land. Last year, Sega has released the Sega Game Gear, and the biggest selling point of the Game Gear is that it had color and a bright light, which makes even looking at the game to look just as good as it was on console. But the downfall about the Sega Game Gear, which is the reason why it could never go against Nintendo's Game Boy, is due to the fact that using all those great technology seriously drains the battery life, which in itself caused a lot of childhood bankruptcies for all those kids who keep buying batteries in order to keep playing the Sega Game Gear. And the reason why I'm only mentioning the Sega Game Gear up till now is just the fact that I never finished a game using the Sega Game Gear due to the fact that the batteries always drain out. Well, the only good game that came out in 1992 for the Sega Game Gear was the Sega Game Gear's version of Sonic the Hedgehog. Now let's jump shift to the Super Nintendo, because boy, do we have a lot to talk about this year of this console. One of the newest features that this system had released was the NES mouse. This peripheral was to interact with video games, more suitable for games that has arrow keys used for control. And you can't imagine all the possibilities that this peripheral could make. Probably we could have more point-and-click adventure games. Probably RTS games would be great for consoles. Or maybe a new game innovation. Nope! We didn't get much of anything out of this machine other than using PC ports like Civilization and Lemmings to control a lot easier. The highlight of even getting this mouse was Mario Paint. Okay, there was no point of even owning Mario Paint because other computers have programs that actually have better paint programs, and you can actually print out your work. However, it was suitable for young age gamers who didn't have a computer to open creativity and learn music. Nothing much really. There was a handful of games that uses the NES mouse, but what's the whole point of it if there's not that much good games that actually uses it well? With that out of the way, now let's talk about the great games of the NES of 1992. We had Super Star Wars, that was a great platformer for any Star Wars fan. The production quality was really good, where the sound effects were all straight from the movies, and the level designs and enemy variety were both things that we've seen and never seen before in the movie trilogy, which consist on the run-and-gun gameplay. Though being that this is following the story of A New Hope, it made a couple of changes, like rescuing R2 from the Jawas in a giant tank, killing hundreds of stormtroopers in a bar, and destroying enemies that we've never seen in the film. This was one of the best video game movies available for the SNES, and we should thank LucasArts for bringing the Star Wars experience in the 16-bit era. But if you want something even more hardcore, check out Contra 3 Alien Wars. Taking advantage of the technology provided for the Super Nintendo, the graphics on Contra 3 improved upon the NES versions, bringing it closer to the quality of the arcade counterparts. New styles of levels in the Alien Wars involve motorcycle chases, riding on missiles, and 2 bonuses of Mode 7 enabled top view levels. The weapon system is revamped, the players can carry 2 weapons instead of 1, and so much more. Another one of my favorites is Super Double Dragon. This is my favorite game of the entire Double Dragon series because it was the most polished the series has ever been. The game consists of 7 very long stages, which includes casino, airport, martial arts gym, fighting on top of a moving truck, a city slum, a forest, and the gang's hideout. Since the Super Nintendo controls have even more buttons, you have the ability to punch, kick, jump, the ability to guard for blocking attacks, and all of which made it more combat-based than your average beat-em-up. I have a lot of great memories playing those 2 games, but I have even more memories playing Super Mario Kart. Now this is where Nintendo puts even more great use of the Mode 7 technology technology in a whole new level by making it a kart racing game. During the game, player takes control of any one of the selection of the Mario franchise characters and drive karts around the track with the Mario series theme. The goal of the game is to either finish the race ahead of the other racers who are controlled by the computer and other players, or complete the circuit at the fastest time. What's quite different about this racing game, among everything else before it, is that whenever you play a single player mode, you have split screen where the top of the screen shows the driver and what's ahead of him, and the bottom is the map of all the characters of where everyone is in the track. What this title did new in the racing game genre is to give abilities or power-ups to the player's kart if the vehicle passes over the question mark box. Power-ups such as the ability to throw shells and bananas allow racers to hit others with objects, causing them to spin and lose control. Computer players as well also carries power-ups when they drive over the question mark box, and they are able to hit each other, especially the player. Lines of coins are found in the tracks in competitive race modes, and running over these coins, the karts collect them and increases the top speed. Having coins also help the player when other hits the kart instead of running and losing control as they lose the coin. The game features advanced maneuvers such as power sliding and hopping, which allows the kart maintain speed while turning. Super Mario Kart was a huge title when it was released, but I can't say it's the best racing game available for the Super Nintendo because there are other great titles like F-Zero that can't be matched. The best game released on the NES on 1992 is the legendary game called The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. This game converts back to the old style gameplay from the original Legend of Zelda, where it was an overhead action adventure where there were so many enemies to kill, tons of puzzle solving, and temple crawling. Despite using mechanics and concepts from the original, A Link to the Past introduces new elements and innovations. For instance, arrows are now separate items as bombs are in the original instead of using a rupee to fire an arrow. Controlling Link is more flexible than the previous games as you can walk diagonally and do plenty of amazing tricks. Link's sword was improved to swinging sideways instead of merely stabbing forward. This gives the sword a broader range to make the combat easier. Recurring items and techniques were introduced for the first time in A Link to the Past, such as the hook shot, the master sword, the spin technique, the ocarina, and the Pegasus boots. A Link to the Past is the first appearance of what will be subsequently become a major Zelda trademark, like the existence of two parallel worlds which the player travels. First called the Light World, which is the ordinary Hyrule where Link grew up with his uncle. The second is what was once the Sacred Realm but became the Dark World when Ganon acquired the Triforce. A Link to the Past is one of the best-selling NES games, selling 4.61 million units around the world, and has had an exceptionally long stay on Nintendo Power's top game list when the NES list has finally retired, staying in the list for 5 consecutive years in the top 20 spot. A Link to the Past was critically acclaimed upon its release with its graphics, gameplay, and has been recognized by critics as one of the best games of all time. But most of all, it was a faithful conversion of the original, and even going far beyond what everyone expected. It had a really great narrative, fantastic gameplay, and from top to bottom, it was simply an awesome experience. And now looking at the Sega Genesis, they weren't at all giving up on the console war, because they were more aggressive than ever before. Already, the Genesis does what NINTENDO'N'T has already been in outdated terms since the Super Nintendo has been released. Now Sega is attacking Nintendo with this new ad campaign against the Super Nintendo.
The Sega Genesis has blast processing. Super Nintendo doesn't. So what's blast processing do? What if you don't have blast processing?
So Sega is making another excuse why Nintendo is obsolete by using this ad campaign called blast processing. May I remind everybody that F-Zero is just as fast, if not faster, than Sonic the Hedgehog? Speaking of Sonic the Hedgehog has released a sequel, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Now this is what you call one of the best sequels ever made, because there were so many improvements over the original Sonic the Hedgehog, include significant larger levels, faster gameplay, and a new stunt work called the Super Dash Attack, where you press the down arrow buttons and start pressing any of the other buttons to apply that special dash attack. But what's so significant about this sequel is that it introduces Sonic friend, a two-tailed fox named Miles Prower, or what everybody loves to call him, Tails. And what's really cool about Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is that when you play in single-player mode, the second player has the ability to control Tails, and you wouldn't believe how useful this sidekick is, because he's just as fast as Sonic the Hedgehog, and he also can propel up in the air using his two tails to help Sonic to reach to high distances. Having this new character around, this calls for a multiplayer challenge. Now, even though a lot of people really dislike the multiplayer feature in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 because of the noticeable slowdowns and the squash play areas for each player, and only being able to play in 3 different zones, it was still a lot of fun to play this game with my brother. Another big improvement over the original is those special stages. Remember the original Sonic the Hedgehog that you had to jump your way to the moving edges just to get the Chaos Emeralds? Well, in this one here, Sonic and Tails are running into a tube trying to collect 50 rings in order to be rewarded for the Chaos Emerald. But watch out, there's so many bombs in the way that could take away your 50 rings. The release of Sonic 2 was the one main reasons that Sega caught up to Nintendo in the console wars. It brought their market shares up to 50% within 6 months of its release. Introducing Tails was one of the best ideas that Sega has ever made, and from here on out, each Sonic installment they introduce a new character. And today we have more than enough characters that the Sonic fanbase actually love or hates. Being that this game is so much more faster and much more exciting, earned itself success by selling over 60 million copies, and the Sonic franchise itself became Sega's most prized possession. Another fantastic title for the Sega Genesis is Kid Chameleon. And this platformer progresses through a series of levels containing airy deadly enemies and obstacles. But one of the main highlights of this game is definitely the power-ups that transform Kid Chameleon, the character you play as, into the Iron Knight, Red Samurai, Berserker, Menax, Juggernaut, Micromax, and other superheroes within the virtual reality that Kid Chameleon is in. How about one of the most anticipated sequels for the Genesis, Streets of Rage 2? Though the gameplay is the same thing as the last game, but the levels are much longer, the numbers of enemies you can beat is much more than ever, and the best part is the alternative endings that creates even more replay value. But the biggest highlight for Sega in 1992 was that they finally released the Sega CD. We all know that Sega's blast processing doesn't even have the good graphical quality of Mode 7 on the SNES. However, having the Sega CD actually did improve the quality of the technology, and it's not as bad as how people claim it to be. The technology of Sega CD can be immediately turned on when you attach the CD drive and switch on the Genesis. There you have a menu screen that can play CD music, Sega CD games, and actually has its own save system. To my knowledge, this is actually the first built-in save features that a video game console has actually had. Sega CD has a really decent loading screen, good quality sound that can incorporate voice acting, and actually play video. This is around the time when CD-ROMs actually can play video with cinematic cutscenes to actually tell the video game story. So what is the selling point of the Sega CD? No, Night Trap! Night Trap! Night Trap! I forgot the biggest issue with gaming in the early 90s. Those fucking full-motion video games. You know, since the CD-ROM has so much more room than your ordinary cartridge and floppy disk that hold from 3.5 to 10 megabytes that we were using to over 700 megabytes crammed into a disk. The only problem is, developers just thought that making videos and video games out of them actually was a good idea. And unfortunately, it was a terrible idea. Why? Because so many FMV video games, you're not either watching a good movie, nor are you even playing a good game. I mean, look at the terrible writing on this thing. You can tell that none of the actors gives two shit about it.
And what's my payback? 1 million pounds of tube steak.
Wait, what the fuck? The Sega CD was not the only victim of this flood of FMV video games, but also there are many other consoles that actually run with a CD game. They are also victim of this bad idea, and especially computer games that actually started the damn thing. So do I hate FMVs? Fucking hell I do! So why did I say that the Sega CD isn't all that bad? Because if you look past through the awful FMV and bullshit educational games, there are actually some good exclusives for the Sega CD, and here's one of them. Lunar, the Silver Star. This is a traditional top-down role-playing game featuring two-dimensional characters and environments, making use of the SEGA CD disc hardware capabilities, short videos, and audio usage is the game's narrative, including full or quarter-screen animation images and readbook audio sound qualities. Players are able to save by using the SEGA CD's internal RAM, and the turn-based battle sequences are some of the most awesome battle sequences ever seen in RPGs in general. You got yourself some of the most memorable characters of the series: Alex, Null, Luna, Ramus, Nash, Mia, Kyle, and Jessica. And what's so awesome about this role-playing game is that you can strategize and customize your own battle tactics and battle systems. But most of all, the presentation and its narrative storytelling is some of the corniest, I admit, but some of the most magical up to this point. And this was around the time when anime wasn't that popular in North America, and it's games like Lunar that showed a lot of exposure of what Japanese animation is like. And it's also one of the saving graces for the SEGA CD. Hey, don't act like SEGA was the only one in the hype for the CD-ROM games, because Nintendo too wanted to be in the CD gaming business. For a long time, the Famicom couldn't read discs properly, so they needed a manufacturer that actually know how to make an add-on to read their discs. They looked up to Sony because their reputation as the world's best electronic manufacturer, and they were able to make it happen. Way back in the late 80s, Nintendo and Sony teamed up together to make the SNES CD, which is a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo. However, that would not be the case. Of course, Nintendo was unhappy with Sony's demands that they asked that all Nintendo CD games are owned by Sony, plus they were thinking of doing their own console in the near future. So you couldn't blame Nintendo for getting so upset over a ridiculous deal. In CES 1992, or Consumer Electronics Show, Sony told everyone they were about to release the Nintendo CD attachment, but on the next day, Nintendo publicly announced that Sony was making a mistake and they put the Philips Corporation to make their CD-ROM attachment. After that instance, Sony was pissed because they were screwed by Nintendo. It was rude for Nintendo for not telling them that they cut the deal, but instead they embarrassed them publicly. And you know what Sony did? Sony swore vendetta on Nintendo. Sony would not stand on this public humiliation, and being that this is a billion-dollar corporation, they have made their decision to finally enter the gaming business and compete against Nintendo in their own game. So what will Sony be doing in the gaming business? Well, you have to keep watching Gexup's Gaming in the 90s to find out what Sony did to enter the gaming business. This concludes this episode of Gaming in the 90s. Hope you enjoyed it, and see you all in the next one.